I want to start at the end, or what felt like the end at the time, but turned out to be a beginning. I was sitting at my kitchen counter at 11:14 on a Thursday night in November, in a house that still smelled faintly of the shipping boxes I'd broken down and stacked by the back door. And I was looking at a number on a screen. $1,042,317. Cumulative sales. 12 months. One product line. One woman. One laptop that had a sticker on it from a farmer's market I'd visited 3 years ago that said grow something. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I sat very still and I looked at that number for a long time. And the thing I felt, the loudest, most specific thing, wasn't pride or relief or excitement, though all of those were there underneath. The loudest thing was a memory. My mother's laugh. Not her warm laugh, the one she used when something genuinely delighted her. The other one, the short one, the one that meant I don't want to say what I'm thinking directly, so I'll say it like this instead. She had used that laugh the day I told her what I was building, and I had been hearing it at odd moments in the back of my mind for every single one of the 12 months that had led to this number on this screen. Let me take you back to where it started. I have a specific kind of skin. I know that sounds like an unusual way to open a chapter about business, but bear with me because the business came entirely from the skin, and the skin is where the whole story lives. I have the kind of skin that the beauty industry spent decades either ignoring or getting catastrophically wrong. Dry in ways that standard moisturizers don't address. Reactive to fragrances and preservatives that mainstream products were built around. The kind of skin that sends you down rabbit holes of ingredient lists and online forums, and eventually, if you're stubborn enough, into your own kitchen. I started making my own products at 26. Nothing formal. A whipped shea butter situation that I'd modified from a recipe I found online until it was something entirely different and entirely mine. A facial oil that I built from scratch after 2 years of testing ratios. A scalp treatment that solved a problem I'd had my whole life, and that when I mentioned it to friends, made them say, "Can you make me some?" with a speed and certainty that should have told me something. It told me something. It just took me a while to act on it. I spent 6 months researching before I told anyone in my family. Cosmetic safety regulations, labeling requirements, packaging suppliers, small batch manufacturing options, e-commerce platforms, shipping logistics. I had a notebook, a physical one, spiral bound, covered in my own handwriting, that was dense with calculations and timelines and questions I was slowly answering one by one. By the time I sat down with my parents to tell them what I was planning, I wasn't pitching a vague idea. I was presenting something that had already been thought through carefully from product to customer to shipping label. I should have known that wouldn't matter. It was a Sunday. My parents had a thing about Sunday dinners. They were mandatory or as close to mandatory as adult children ever really face. And I had learned over the years that they were actually good forums for significant conversations because my father was always in a better mood after a meal, and my mother was more likely to listen when her hands were occupied with clearing dishes. I had timed it for dessert. This was strategic. I laid it out the way I'd practiced. The product line, 4 SKUs to start, targeting a specific underserved customer, I could describe precisely because that customer was me. The e-commerce setup, the packaging I'd designed, the small batch manufacturer I'd vetted and visited in person, the marketing approach, the financial projections, conservative ones, built on assumptions I'd validated by studying comparable brands. I talked for about 8 minutes. My father listened with the expression he used when he was reserving judgment, not unkind, just withheld. My mother listened with the expression she used when she had already formed an opinion and was waiting for a pause long enough to deliver it. When I finished, my father said, "It's a saturated market." This is technically true, and also I knew not a complete thought. It was the opening note of a longer skepticism. I waited. My mother didn't wait. My mother leaned back slightly and said, "Baby, you want to sell lotion on the internet." The way she said it had no question mark. It was a statement delivered in a tone that contained, somehow, the entire verdict. The implausibility of it, the smallness of it, the gentle embarrassment of watching her daughter announce this as a serious plan. And then she did the laugh. The short one. The "I don't want to say what I'm thinking" one. My father smiled in the way he smiled when he agreed with my mother, but didn't want to be the one to say it. "These things are harder than they look," he said. "Most of them fail in the first year. You have a good job. Why take the risk?" I had answers to all of this. I had prepared answers to all of this, but I sat across from their faces, and I understood, with a clarity that was more useful than it was painful, that answers weren't what was needed here. What was happening had nothing to do with the merits of my research or the soundness of my projections. What was happening was something older and simpler. They had already decided. The deciding wasn't about my business plan. I said, "I hear you." I drove home. I opened my laptop. I finalized my store name. I launched 3 weeks later. I want to tell you the first year honestly, because I think there's a version of this story that glosses over the hard parts and makes it sound like I simply ignored the doubt and everything bloomed. That's not quite right. The doubt was loud. My parents' voices in particular had a way of becoming a kind of background frequency. Not constant, not always audible, but present. On the days when an order came back because of a shipping error, I heard my mother's laugh. On the nights when I was packaging orders alone at midnight after a full day at my regular job, I heard, "You have a good job, why take the risk?" On the month when my sales were flat for 3 weeks, and I had inventory sitting in my second bedroom, and I was staring at my projections trying to figure out what I'd gotten wrong. Those voices were very available. This is the part people don't talk about enough. The self-doubt that uses the voices of the people who were supposed to believe in you first. The way their skepticism doesn't stay in the room where it was delivered but follows you home and lives in your head and shows up at the worst moments. What I did with it was work, not to prove them wrong. I want to be careful about that framing because it gives them too much credit for what I built. I didn't build this for them. I built it for the woman who was me at 26, standing in a drugstore aisle reading labels and finding nothing. I built it for every message in my inbox that said I've been looking for something like this my whole life. I built it for a customer named D who ordered 4 times in the first 6 months and sent me a photograph of her skin and a message that said I cried when I saw the difference. That is why I built it. My parents' skepticism was just weather. It was just something happening outside while I worked. What I learned in that first year could fill its own notebook, and did. I learned that my initial 4 SKUs had one clear bestseller, and one that needed reformulation, and 2 that were steady and serviceable. I learned that my customer was real and loyal and vocal in a way that money couldn't manufacture. She talked about my products to people she loved, which is the most powerful marketing that exists. I learned about paid acquisition and email lists and the specific rhythms of a product-based business in a way that no research can fully teach you. You have to live it to know it. By month 8, I had quit my job. I didn't tell my parents. I revised my benefits, updated my emergency fund, and gave my notice on a Friday. And that Monday, I sat at my kitchen counter and worked on my own thing for the first time in a full business day. It felt like breathing out after years of breathing in. By month 11, I had hired a part-time fulfillment assistant because I couldn't do the volume alone anymore. By month 12, I was 2 weeks away from a number I had written in my notebook in month 3, circled twice, and put a question mark next to. I did not call my parents with the milestone. I want to be clear about this. I had not been secretive about the business. It had a website. It had a social media presence. It had press coverage in 2 publications that had come to me rather than the other way around. I simply had not made my parents part of the ongoing story. They had declined that role at the Sunday dinner table, and I had accepted their declination and moved on. My cousin Portia found the business. Portia is 23, and she has the specific energy of someone who treats social media as a full-time research project. And she stumbled across my brand through an influencer post and placed an order before she realized the founder page had my face on it. She called me immediately, which I appreciated, and we had a warm conversation that ended with her asking if she could share it with the family group chat. I said yes, because why wouldn't I? The group chat response was enthusiastic in the way family group chats are enthusiastic. Lots of reactions, lots of I had no idea, lots of people placing orders and sending me screenshots. My Aunt Delphine, my mother's sister, sent a voice note that lasted 4 minutes and was mostly the sound of her being delighted. My parents were both in the group chat. My mother texted me privately within the hour. I didn't know you were still doing this. It looks nice. I said thank you. My father texted 10 minutes later. Portia says it's doing well. I said it was going well. Yes. 2 days later, I hit the number. I did not call my parents when I hit $1 million in sales. I want to be straightforward about that because some people assume I must have, that the natural human impulse to share a triumph with your parents would override everything. Maybe for other people. For me, sitting at that counter at 11:14 at night, looking at that number, the impulse was quieter than that. I felt it for myself. I let it be mine. I made tea and I went to bed, and I slept better than I had in months. What I did do 2 days later was post about it. Not the number. I'm a private person about specifics, and I think there's wisdom in that, especially early. But I posted a reflection about the first year, about building something from nothing, about the customer who sent the photograph of her skin, about what it means to make something that solves a real problem for a real person who has been waiting for that solution their entire life. I wrote it honestly, and I didn't write it for anyone in particular. And when I posted it, I went for a walk and didn't check my phone for 2 hours. My mother called while I was on the walk, then called again, then texted, "Call me when you can." I called her from the sidewalk, 3 blocks from my house, with dry leaves on the ground and cold air on my face. She said, "I read what you posted." "Okay," I said. "It's doing really well." Not a question. Taking in information. "Yes," I said. A pause. "Your father and I have been talking. Your cousin Patrick has been asking about starting something online. Something similar. We thought maybe you could sit down with him. And there it was. Not I'm proud of you. Not I was wrong to laugh. The first destination after arriving at my success was how it could be redirected. How the thing I had built could immediately become a resource for someone else's use. Not even for her, for Patrick, a 20-year-old cousin I was fond of but had spoken to perhaps 4 times in the last year. I stood on that sidewalk and I felt something settle in me, cold and clear and not unkind. Just honest. "Mom," I said, "I'm not going to do that." Silence. I don't have the capacity right now to consult for someone else. I'm in the middle of building my own thing. If Patrick wants to start something, there are resources available to him. Books, courses, communities, the same things I used. I just thought, since you know how to do it. "I do know how to do it," I said. I learned how to do it over the past year while I was doing it. That's how I know. Another silence. Longer. We didn't think it would work, she said. Finally. Not an apology. Just a fact, offered plainly with something behind it that might have been the beginning of something or might not. I know, I said. My father called the following Sunday. Not at dinner time. In the morning, which was unusual for him. He called at 9:15, and I almost didn't pick up because Sunday mornings were my development time, the hours I protected most carefully for deep work. But something made me answer. He asked if I had a few minutes. I said yes. He talked for a while about things that weren't quite what he was calling to say, about his week, about the weather, about a neighbor's situation that had nothing to do with anything. I let him talk. I knew this mode. He was circling. Then he said, I've been thinking about the dinner. When you told us about your idea, I didn't say anything. I waited. I was thinking about why I said what I said. A pause. I think I was scared for you. I think I've been scared for you your whole life in a way I never found the right way to say. And the scared came out as what I said. This was more self-awareness than I had heard from my father in 30 years of knowing him. I sat with it carefully. I'm not looking for something from you, he said. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say that. I thought about all the things I could say. I thought about the dinner table and the laugh and the 12 months of that laugh living in my head. I thought about all the late nights and the flat weeks and the moments where I'd almost believed them. I appreciate you saying it, I said, and I meant it. Not as a resolution, not as a closing of a chapter, just as what it was. A true thing he had said. A true thing I had received. Your product, he said. The whipped butter, one your cousin Portia ordered. Your mother's been using it. I laughed. A real one, surprised out of me. Is she? Every morning, he said. Don't tell her I told you. I want to address the word begging because I think it means something specific, and I want to be honest about what actually happened versus what the word might suggest. Nobody got on their knees. Nobody called at midnight in desperation. What happened was more mundane and more revealing than that. Over the following months, as the business continued to grow and as press coverage expanded, and as a particular article in a small but well-regarded publication brought a wave of new customers and a wave of new visibility, my family started having a different relationship with what I was doing. My Aunt Delphine mentioned at a gathering that she'd been telling people about my brand. My uncle asked at a holiday dinner if I was hiring for his daughter. My mother started sharing my social media posts without telling me, which I discovered through analytics that showed referral traffic from accounts I recognized. And then there was the moment, the specific one that fits the word begging more than anything else, that happened at a family gathering in the spring. My cousin Marcus, who had sat at a different Sunday dinner table 8 months earlier and described my business idea as cute but not really scalable, cornered me near the buffet table with his phone out. He had a concept, a product idea, a whole pitch, rehearsed, delivered with an earnestness that would have been touching if I didn't remember the word cute. He wanted to know if I'd partner with him, or mentor him, or at minimum look at his concept and tell him where he was going wrong. I looked at him for a moment. I looked at his phone, extended toward me with his notes on the screen. Marcus, I said, when I was building this, did you offer to help? He looked down. He knew what the answer was. No, I said. You called it cute, not scalable. He started to say something. I kept my voice level. I'm not saying this to embarrass you. I'm saying it because I want you to understand something before we talk about your idea. The knowledge I have, I paid for it, with time and money and a lot of nights I'd rather not revisit. It's not a resource that's just sitting there available, because we're family. Do you understand the difference? He said he did. Whether he really did, I don't know, but he listened. I didn't partner with him. I didn't mentor him in any formal sense. What I did was give him 20 minutes of the most direct, unvarnished advice I'd received myself. The stuff nobody tells you until you're already in it. I didn't soften it. I didn't make it encouraging. I just made it true. He took notes. I watched him take notes, and I thought quietly, good. The second year was harder than the first in all the ways that growth is hard and easier in all the ways that clarity is easy. I reformulated the product that hadn't been working. I expanded to 7 SKUs. I brought on a full-time operations manager named Josephine, who had more systems instinct in her left hand than I had in my whole body, and who made the business run in ways it couldn't have without her. I moved into a proper workspace, not an office building, but a real space leased with a table long enough to lay out packaging designs and a back room for inventory, and a window that got afternoon light in a way that made me stay late just to sit in it. I turned down 2 acquisition offers, both from companies I respected, both with numbers that made my accountant clear his throat significantly. I turned them down because I had built this specific thing for a specific reason, and I wasn't finished with it yet. Maybe someday. Not yet. My mother came to the workspace. Once. I showed her around. She stood in the room for a long time, turning slowly, taking it in, the shelves of product, the packaging station, the desk I'd chosen carefully, the afternoon light in the window. She didn't say a lot. What she said was, "You built all of this." Not a question, an acknowledgement, said quietly, to herself almost, but loud enough that I heard it. "Yes," I said. She picked up one of the products, the facial oil, my first one, the one I'd spent 2 years getting right, and she turned it over in her hands, and she read the label, my name on it, the brand I'd chosen. The ingredient list I designed down to the order they appeared. She put it carefully back on the shelf. I didn't ask what she was thinking. Some things you let be what they are. I look at the dashboard differently now than I did that first night. Not with less feeling, with more, honestly, but more complex. The number isn't the point anymore, the way it felt like the point that November night. It's become a tool. A measure, something I check the way you check a compass, not to celebrate the reading, but to understand where I am and where I'm going. What I carry from the first year isn't the $1 million. It's Dee's photograph. It's the formula I got wrong and reformulated. It's the 3-week flat sales month where I sat with the fear and didn't let it make my decisions. It's Josephine, who laughed at my filing system when she started and reorganized it and made everything work better, and who I'm proud to employ in a way I didn't know I could feel proud of something. And yes, I carry the Sunday dinner table, my mother's short laugh. My father's, most of them fail in the first year. I carry it differently than I used to, not as a wound and not as a trophy, more like a reference point, a fixed coordinate in the map of how I got here. They didn't believe in it. I did. That gap between what they could see and what I could see was real, and it mattered, and it was ultimately mine to close. I closed it, not for them, not even in spite of them, though I understand if that's how it reads. I closed it because I had looked at a problem that was real and a solution that was mine, and I refused to let someone else's limited vision become the ceiling on what I was willing to try. That is the whole business school. Right there. That's the whole story, too. Grow something.